The quantum snow fell in peculiar spirals over Neo-London, each crystalline flake encoded with atmospheric data that Lewis Harper's retinal implants automatically decoded. Temperature, -4°C. Precipitation probability, 97%. Particulate composition, H2O with trace xenon isotopes from the terraforming stations in orbit. It was Christmas Eve, 2184, and the city hummed with the electromagnetic pulse of a civilization that had reached beyond Earth's cradle only to find itself more isolated than ever. Lewis tightened his grip on Anna's gloved hand as they navigated the crowded pedestrian causeway suspended 300 meters above the old Thames. His daughter was 9 years old, her dark eyes reflecting the bioluminescent advertisements that crawled across every available surface like colonies of phosphorescent bacteria. The ads whispered directly into their auditory cortexes through bone conduction, selling everything from genetic modifications to off-world passage on the newest fusion drive vessels. "Daddy, look at the Jovian whale." Anna pointed toward a massive holographic projection that materialized above Trafalgar Plaza. The creature, a silicon-based life form discovered in Jupiter's upper atmosphere, undulated through the simulated clouds, its translucent body pulsing with colors that human eyes had been augmented to perceive. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Lewis said, though his attention was divided. His heads-up display showed an urgent message from the hospital where he worked as a xenobiological surgeon. Another Centauri settler had come in with a parasitic infection from improperly sterilized cargo. The message could wait. Tonight was for Anna. They descended the helix ramp toward street level, where the older architecture still stood, buildings from the early 22nd century. Before the contact, before humanity learned it was merely one note in a discordant symphony of galactic civilizations. The ground-level districts had become refuges for those who couldn't afford neural upgrades or genetic optimization, places where the unwanted gathered like sediment at the bottom of a beaker. That's when Anna stopped walking. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of passing grav cars and the distant caroling of a church choir whose members had replaced their vocal cords with synthetic harmonizers. Lewis followed her gaze to an alcove between two buildings, where the quantum snow hadn't yet been cleared by the municipal drones. A figure sat huddled against the thermal conductive wall, wrapped in what appeared to be a thermal blanket of human manufacture, though it was torn and clearly inadequate for the temperature. But it wasn't the poverty that had arrested Anna's attention. It was the woman's face, or rather, the elegant structure that resembled a face but defied human evolutionary architecture. Her skin possessed an iridescent quality, shifting between copper and deep violet depending on the angle of ambient light. Where a human would have had hair, she had what appeared to be sensory filaments that moved independently, each one tipped with a bioluminescent node that pulsed in a pattern Lewis recognized from his medical training. Distress signals in the electromagnetic spectrum that human eyes couldn't naturally perceive. Her eyes, 3 of them arranged in a triangular configuration, blinked asynchronously, the nictitating membranes translucent enough to reveal the complex golden irises beneath. She was humanoid, approximately 1.8 meters tall, but her skeletal structure was clearly different. The joints bent at angles that would be impossible for a human, and her fingers, 6 on each hand, were longer, more delicate, ending in what looked like metallic tips that were probably organic sensory organs. Lewis's medical training kicked in immediately. His retinal implants scanned her, feeding data directly into his visual cortex. Species, unregistered, heart rate equivalents, 3 separate cardiovascular systems all functioning below optimal parameters. Core temperature, 18 degrees Celsius, hypothermic for her species, whatever it was. Nutritional status, critical. Time since last caloric intake, estimated 72 hours minimum. "She's cold, Daddy," Anna said, her own breath forming clouds of vapor that the city's nanoscrapers immediately analyzed and cataloged. The alien woman's gaze shifted toward them. There was intelligence in those eyes, vast, ancient, and profoundly sad. She made no move to approach them, no gesture of supplication. She simply existed in that space, another piece of urban debris that the city's cleaning algorithms would eventually process and relocate. Lewis knew the statistics. After the contact 30 years ago, Earth had become a way station for dozens of alien species. The Galactic Collective, a loose confederation of civilizations that made the United Nations look positively coherent, had established Earth as a neutral zone for refugee processing. Some aliens came voluntarily, fleeing wars fought with weapons that could unwrite reality itself. Others came as criminals, exiled from their homeworlds for crimes that human legal systems couldn't even conceptualize. The processing centers were overwhelmed. It took years to verify identities, to confirm asylum claims, to arrange passage to designated sanctuary worlds. In the meantime, thousands of aliens lived in the margins of human cities, unable to work legally, unable to access basic resources, invisible to a society that had its own problems to solve. "Daddy, can we take her home?" Anna's voice cut through his analysis like a scalpel through tissue. Lewis felt his throat constrict. How did you explain to a 9-year-old the complexities of interstellar immigration law? How did you tell her that taking an unregistered alien into your home could result in prosecution under the xeno-integration protocols? That the woman sitting in the snow could be a war criminal, a disease carrier, or worse, a being whose very physiology might be incompatible with human environments? But Anna was looking at him with those impossibly earnest eyes, the same eyes her mother had had before the atmospheric processor accident on Titan had taken her 3 years ago. Maria Harper had been a xenoanthropologist, someone who believed that understanding the other was humanity's greatest calling. "Anna, it's complicated," Lewis began, kneeling beside his daughter so their faces were level. "We don't know who she is, where she's from, or what she needs. She might require medical care we can't provide. She might. She's cold and hungry and alone on Christmas Eve," Anna interrupted, her voice firm with the kind of moral clarity that adults spent lifetimes trying to recapture. "Mommy would have helped her." The words hit Lewis like a photon torpedo to his central nervous system. Maria would have helped. Without hesitation, without running the risk calculations, without consulting the legal databases. She would have seen a suffering being and acted. Lewis stood and approached the alien woman slowly, his hands visible and empty, a universal gesture of non-aggression that most species seem to understand. As he drew closer, his implants picked up more data. She was wearing what had once been a sophisticated environmental suit, but it was damaged beyond functionality. The fabric showed scorch marks consistent with plasma weapons. Refugee, then, not criminal. "Do you understand English?" Lewis asked, knowing his words would be simultaneously translated into the 17 most common galactic languages by the city's ambient translation network. The woman's central eye focused on him while the other two continued scanning for threats. When she spoke, her voice was a harmonic chord produced by what might have been multiple vocal apparatuses. The translation came through his auditory implants a microsecond later. "I understand. Please. Do not trouble yourself. I will move if I am violating local ordinances." Her accent was impeccable, better than most humans. She'd been educated, probably wealthy once. Lewis recognized the signs. He'd seen enough refugees in the hospital to know that desperation wore many faces, some of them etched with advanced degrees and cultural sophistication. "You're hypothermic," Lewis said, his doctor's instincts overriding his citizen's caution. "Your cardiovascular systems are compromised. When did you last eat?" "I do not recall," she said. "Time has become fluid." Anna had crept closer, ignoring Lewis's silent gesture to stay back. "What's your name?" she asked, her child's directness cutting through the layers of adult complexity. The alien woman's sensory filaments brightened momentarily, a response that Lewis's database identified as surprise mixed with something like gratitude. I am called Ziyana of the seventh harmonic, but that name has little meaning here in this place, in this cold. I'm Anna, his daughter replied. This is my daddy, Lewis. He's a doctor, he helps people, all kinds of people. Lewis felt the weight of his daughter's faith in him, the burden of being someone's hero. He ran through the scenarios in his mind. If he reported Ziyana to the authorities, she'd be taken to a processing center, essentially a detention facility where conditions were barely better than the street. If he left her here, she'd likely be dead by morning. Her species clearly wasn't adapted for Earth's winter temperatures. I have a spare room, Lewis heard himself say, the words escaping before his rational mind could veto them. It's climate-controlled. I can adjust the atmospheric composition if you tell me your requirements. We have medical facilities, basic nutrition synthesizers that can probably approximate your dietary needs if you provide me with your biochemical profile. Ziyana's three eyes widened in what might have been shock. You would offer this to a stranger, to an alien. It's Christmas Eve, Anna said matter-of-factly. That's what you do on Christmas Eve, you help people. Lewis managed a smile despite the alarm bells ringing in his head from his risk assessment subroutines. My daughter is correct, though I'll need you to submit to a medical scan, protocol requires it, and there will be paperwork, mountains of paperwork. The immigration authorities will need to be notified. I understand, Ziyana said. I am registered with the collective. My asylum claim is pending review. I have committed no crimes. I simply fell through the cracks of your bureaucracy. The cracks are pretty wide, Lewis said, offering his hand. Can you walk? Ziyana reached out, her six-fingered hand grasping his. Her skin was cool to the touch, but the metallic tips of her fingers hummed with a gentle vibration, some kind of bioelectric field. As she stood, Lewis realized she was taller than his initial scan had indicated, at least 2 meters when fully upright. Her legs bent backward at what would be the knee on a human, giving her a graceful, bird-like stance. Anna took Ziyana's other hand without hesitation, her small fingers disappearing into the alien's larger grasp. Don't worry, she said. Our house is really warm, and Daddy makes the best hot chocolate. Well, it's synthesized, but it's still good. They began walking toward the transit station, an unlikely trio moving through the quantum snow. Other pedestrians gave them a wide berth. Aliens were common enough in the city, but the sight of a human family escorting a clearly destitute alien still drew stares. Lewis ignored them, his mind already cataloging what he'd need to do. File a temporary guardianship claim with the Xenointegration Office, run a full medical diagnostic, determine Ziyana's nutritional requirements, adjust the guest room's environmental controls. Why? Ziyana asked as they boarded the transit pod, her voice carrying harmonics of genuine confusion. Your species has no obligation to mine. We are not allies. We share no trade agreements. Why risk legal complications for a stranger? Lewis looked at Anna, who was already chattering about the house's layout and which room Ziyana would stay in. His daughter's face was animated with the pure joy of doing something good, something right, something that didn't require complex moral calculations. Because, Lewis said, finding the words that Maria would have used, we're all strangers until we're not. Because my daughter is watching how I respond to suffering, and I want her to learn that compassion isn't species-specific. Because 30 years ago, we were the ones reaching out into the darkness, hoping someone would answer with kindness rather than violence. The transit pod accelerated, carrying them toward the residential sectors where the buildings were older but the sense of community was stronger. Through the transparent hull, Lewis could see the lights of Neo-London spreading out like a neural network, each node a life, a story, a choice being made. Besides, he added, it's Christmas Eve. If there was ever a night for improbable kindness, this is it. Ziana's sensory filaments pulsed in a pattern that the translation matrix identified as deep gratitude mixed with something that didn't have a direct human equivalent, perhaps a recognition of cosmic interconnectedness, or maybe just relief at finding warmth in a cold universe. Anna pressed her face against the pod's hull, watching the snow fall in its quantum patterns. Is it going to be like this, Daddy? Are we going to have a real Christmas? Louis thought about the empty chair at their dinner table, the absence that 3 years hadn't diminished. He thought about Maria and what she would have done. He thought about the refugee crisis spreading across a dozen worlds, about the wars being fought light years away, about the fragile web of understanding that held the galactic collective together. Yes, sweetheart, he said, squeezing her hand. I think we're going to have a very real Christmas indeed. The pod hummed through the night, carrying 3 beings who had, for this moment at least, found something rare in the vast cosmic dark: connection, compassion, and the possibility that kindness might be the most advanced technology of all. End of episode I.